Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I saw a question from a brother that he was asking in general for advice from other brothers and saying, look, if someone caught his wife cheating on him, and I'm assuming that is she had sex with someone else, should he forgive her and stay married to her, or should he divorce her? And my initial reaction was that he can no longer be married to her, because by her sleeping with someone else, she has broken the marriage contract, and it is the fundamental condition of the marriage contract that you not go outside of the marriage. And especially in this case, the laws in the Quran says that if the marriage ends in a divorce, then the woman has to wait 3 menstrual cycles, okay, before she can marry someone else. So she can obviously never be with 2 people simultaneously, and that's a basic breaking the basic condition of marriage. And then someone said to me, what is your evidence for this? What is your proof for this? And I said, well, in Surah Nur, in Surah 24, okay, we see that the Quran says in verse 3, the fornicator or the adulterer, they translate it to mean both or either or, okay. But let's say the adulterer does not marry except a female adulterer or polytheist, and none marries the female adulterer except an adulterer or polytheist, and that has been made unlawful to the believers. Such unions, okay, between such people has been made unlawful to the believers. And so I said, let us do a thought experiment, okay? Because what I find often is the case, and it happened with me quite a bit, is that we have some preconceived notions of the dominant discourse in Islamic jurisprudence, and then we sort of superimpose that on our understanding of the Quran, and we tend to overlook the context in which the Quran is actually speaking about something. So if you go to Surah Nur, you will see that very often verse 2, which reads, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the unmarried woman or unmarried man found guilty of sexual intercourse, lash each one of them with 100 lashes. Now, it often translates az-zaniyatu waz-zani to be the unmarried man or woman guilty of illegal sexual intercourse. However, some translators and some scholars have understood this to mean the married man or woman, meaning that the Quran here is talking about adultery and not fornication, which is contextually true, meaning if you read the chapter of the Quran, then the context here speaks to married people. Why? Because just a few verses later, it says, and those who accuse, verse 4 says, and those who accuse chaste woman and then do not produce 4 witnesses, okay, al-muhsanat, okay, chaste woman, and do not produce 4 witnesses. And chaste women are often also, this is often also seen as married women, but you can see later on it says, and those who, the 6th verse, meaning just 2 verses later, it says, and those who accuse their wives, okay, وَالَّذِينَ يَرْمُونَ أَزْوَاجَهُمْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُمْ شُهَدَاء, okay, and those who accuse their wives. And then it continues. So when we look at the context of what the chapter is talking about, then it's clear that it is contextually referring to married people. And so when we read it with that in mind, we go back and read it again, and we say, the adulterer or adulteress, lash each one of them with 100 lashes. Okay? And do not be taken by pity for them in the religion of Allah, if you should believe in Allah and the last day, and let a group of the believers witness their punishment. And then we go to verse 3. The adulterer does not marry except an adulteress or polytheist, and none marries her except a adulterer or a polytheist, and that marriage to such persons has been made unlawful to the believers. Now, if we take a thought experiment and say that we found this book in a remote location of the earth, let's say on an island, and we read that this is the book of God and that we should judge by this book, and we don't know anything else, but we are literate, and we read this verse. Now we know that the adulterer and adulterer should be given 100 lashes. Okay? The question that arises is that if the woman is married and the man is unmarried, okay, are they both committing adultery? Do you understand the question? If the woman is married, okay, meaning the woman is committing adultery because she's married, but the man that she's doing it with is unmarried, are they both committing adultery? So should we give them both 100 lashes? Or is it only the case when both people are married and they go outside of their marriage with each other? Okay? Because that is the question that would arise if you decide, okay, I'm going to apply the law that I'm reading here. Okay? And that question is being answered in the next verse, which it says, the adulterer does not marry except an adulteress. Okay? And here the mistake we make is that we say, or we don't understand that often the word nikah, okay, is a word that must be applied in context. Meaning sometimes it means marriage, sometimes it means to sleep with someone. Okay? And so if we look at this verse and say, Az-zani la yankahu illa zaniyatan aw mushrikatan. Okay? So if we say, Az-zani la yankihu illa zaniyatan aw mushrikatan. Let me repeat it again because I think I said it wrong. Then, and we translate yankihu here as to sleep with, then it's stating that whoever slept with the person in question to be punished is also to be taken as a person of adultery and is also to be included in the punishment. Because that is the question that arises, right? I mean, if you take az-zaniya was-zani to mean people who commit adultery, and either one of them are not married in this instance, but one of them is married, you would ask, what do you do with the unmarried person in this equation? And so, the next verse answers it, and it says, Az-zani la yankihu illa zaniyatan aw mushrikatan. Okay? That the male, okay, adulterer, okay, does not marry except a female adulteress or polytheist. Okay, in this case, it could both mean to sleep with, okay, and marry. Okay, because there is that reality when it comes to the word nikah in Arabic. Okay, and so it's clarifying what to do. So this means that whether one of them is married and one of them is not married, both of them should have 100 lashes. Okay, and then it goes on and it says, Az-zaniyatu la yankihuha illa zanin aw mushrikun. Okay, and then the female, okay, adulteress, none marries her or none sleeps with her except that he is also a adulterer or a polytheist. Okay, and so this is clear. And why does it say polytheist or polytheist in both instances? Because it's an emphasis. It knows what it said earlier in the Quran, which is that you're not allowed to marry the polytheist. Okay? The believer is not allowed to marry the polytheist, male or female. And so it's emphasizing it is the same, okay? That an adulterer has a disregard for the laws of Allah in the same way, in like fashion, the polytheist, okay? And it's the same way that you are not allowed to be married to the adulterer, you are not allowed to be married to the polytheist. It's making it crystal clear so you cannot argue out of it. And then it goes on, incidentally, okay, to say, وَحُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَحُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Okay, and that is forbidden to the believers. And so I don't see where the ambiguity lies, to be honest. For me, this is wadih. It's crystal clear. Okay? But for some reason, there's a question. The question is whether they should still be together. And the Quran says, وَحُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That when the Quran has branded someone as a zani or zaniya, okay, then لا ينكح, okay, or لا ينكحها إلا زان. It says وَالزَّانِيَةُ, the female adulteress. Okay, in this guy's instance, right, the woman cheated on him. Okay, لا ينكحها. Okay, none shall sleep with her or marry her, depends which shade of meaning you want to take. إلا زان, except an adulterer, or mushrikun, or a polytheist. Which obviously, I mean, it's obvious. That means that the husband, right, can no longer sleep with this woman who the Quran itself classifies as the zaniya, az-zaniya. Okay? And so there is no amends and there is no rejoining together, and none of that can happen because it says وَحُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and that is forbidden to the believers. And I don't know how that is ambiguous in any way, and it doesn't make sense. And I'm appalled that people are telling this poor guy that, hey, you know what? The Quran talks about forgiveness, and forgiveness is best, and all of these kinds of things. Okay? This, by the way, has no bearings on forgiveness. Okay? You might very well forgive the woman and not bear it in your heart and pray for her forgiveness. And she may very well be forgiven. Allah may forgive her. Right? This has no consequence on the legal issue that you cannot be married to her. وَحُرِّمَ ذَلِكَ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, that it is forbidden for the believers. So once the person has been identified as someone of zina, right, and the punishment has gone forth against them, then they can no longer be married. That's basically, I think it's evident, because these are the questions that would come out. Again, as a thought experiment, if you are on an island and you found this book and the book said you must judge by this book, it is the word of God, and you set out to do so, these are the questions that would arise. The first question would be, do you punish the married person and unmarried person equally who are engaged in this act? And the answer is yes, you do. Both of them get 100 lashes, even if one of them is unmarried. And then the second question is, can they stay together? Meaning, the person who committed adultery, can they remain with their spouse who did not commit adultery? And the answer is no, they cannot, because the Quran is very clear. It says, الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة والزانية لا ينكحها إلا زان أو مشرك وحرم ذلك على المؤمنين. So where is the ambiguity? Where is the ambiguity? Again, the adulterer does not marry except an adulteress or polytheist, and none marries her except an adulterer or a polytheist. And that marriage to such persons has been made unlawful to the believers. You cannot be married to them, period. And this is, I mean, I am surprised, in fact, that this was not the default position, to to be honest, I'm surprised that this is not the default position. That the default position is that adultery, okay, from the adultery does not nullify the marriage contract. That's the default position. But I'm saying that it should nullify the marriage contract based on this verse, and especially in the broader context of the Quran, because a woman can never be married to two men at the same time. Okay? I can see how adultery may be for a male. Let's say the man sleeps with a woman he's not married to while he's married. Okay, it's possible for him to say, okay, that's my other wife, or that's what my right hand possesses. Okay? There's a possibility, because the Quran acknowledges polygyny, right? That the other woman can hold a legal juristic status, okay, under either as a wife or as a concubine, okay. But it's virtually impossible within the Quranic context for a woman to be sleeping with two men at the same time, because under the Quranic law, okay, if a woman divorces, she still has to wait for 3 menstrual cycles, okay, before she can marry another man. So even if you were to take yankihu or nikah to mean sex in many instances in the Quran, then even in that case, it's impossible for her to have 2 men at the same time under the Quranic law. And so it doesn't at all make sense that when a marriage contract is violated to that extent that it could still hold as valid, okay, it is frankly impossible. Okay, worse to worse, what you could, I mean, if you were to look at it, let's for argument's sake say that, okay, in terms of the Quran, there was like reconciliation. Let's say that, let's ignore the fact that she committed adultery, and let's treat the adultery she committed as a marriage, for argument's sake, okay? So the first problem is that if she had slept with her husband and then slept with that man, and there wasn't 3 menstrual cycles that gone between the 2 sleepings with, right? Then already it broke a law of the Quran, okay? If we were to consider the adultery as a marriage. Okay. So let's say that she did wait for the 3 menstrual cycles, then she moved on to another guy, but she didn't tell the guy that she was with. And let's classify that other adulterous relationship as a marriage for argument's sake, right? When she comes back to the original guy, then she needs to wait 3 menstrual cycles again to come back to the original guy, which means that if the 3 menstrual cycles, let's say, takes on average 3 months, right? That means she would have had sex twice in 6 months. Once with the one guy, waited 3 menstrual cycles, then with the other guy, waited 3 menstrual cycles. Do you understand what I'm saying? It doesn't even make sense within the Quranic framework, no matter how loose you might want to be with definitions. Okay? So, the obvious, for me, it's very obvious that a person who commits adultery, okay, especially the woman, if the woman commits adultery, then the man can is no longer her husband, basically. The one who was a husband, right up to the point that she committed adultery, is now no longer a husband. That's, for me, seems to be what this verse is saying, and Allah knows best, and those are my thoughts. Okay, you can go and ask your people about it. Thank you very much.